They labeled her a monster, the waitress at Mel's diner who had scars, hid under long sleeves every day to avoid being cruel. Customers who perceived just ugliness when something else lay buried for 3 years whispered about her damaged hands. People made fun of Sarah Miller's looks and dropped tips on the floor while she poured coffee, like she was under them. But today, a construction worker's forceful shove makes her fall cautiously, keeps the illusion up. But the sleeve rides up and shows a military tattoo that makes a silent customer in Thekina booth halt in amazement. His startling recognition will shatter every assumption in that diner. What dark there are secrets behind those scars. Please, leave a remark with your opinions. Michael Kelly sat. He was stooped over in the exact corner booth where he had been 2 hours previously, when the morning rush had just started, and the coffee was still hot. His rough hands held his 3rd cup of black coffee, which had long ago, with a snapshot in his jacket pocket, seemed to help him deal with 18 years of searching and doubt that had gone cold. To burn against his chest like a live coal, a faded picture of himself as a young man in desert camouflage alongside other soldiers from the 3rd Infantry Division, their cheeks gleaming with the invincibility of youth before that night in July 2006, changed everything in ways that still kept him up at night. He watched the waitress move between tables with clear military precision, her movements quick and effective, usually having her left side slightly turned away from customers and wearing long sleeves. Even if it was hot, the diner was so hot that other customers were fanning themselves with menus while she moved and held her hit or screamed at her the way she automatically looked about the room every few minutes, as if she were looking for threats. Military training to someone who understood what to look for. But there was more to it than that. There was something distinctive about her. Bearing that compelled him. Remained longer than expected for a short breakfast and this long observation session. It has to be her, he mumbled to himself for what must have been the 20th time, his voice scarcely heard over the sound of bacon frying in the kitchen and the death rattle of an old air conditioner after 18 years of scouring every Vavery veterans meeting, every online forum and database, and every hospital. It just has to be her standing right here in this nowhere diner. But uncertainty gnawed at him with sharp teeth, because how could he be confident that the last time he saw her face, it was lit by flames and drenched in blood? The last time he heard her voice, thing he had heard before the darkness took him in that burning Humvee. The memories came in pieces, like shrapnel. The loud bang of the IED, the fire that quickly converted their car into a death trap, the door that wouldn't open no matter how hard he tugged, and suddenly her face appeared through the smoke like an avenging angel, who had chosen his life above hers. He remembered how solid her hands were even while everything was going wrong. The window that appeared impossibly small. Remembered the way she had gone back for Thompson even as the ammunition began. She remembered most of all the moment when the second IED went off and she threw her cooking off from the heat. Without thinking, he put his body over his. The bell above the door rang abruptly, waking him up from his daydream and his construction crew pushed their way into the diner with an assertive swagger that changed the mood. Right away from the tranquil morning turned into something charged and uncomfortable, like the static electricity before a rainstorm. Stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, with a sense of entitlement and arrogance. In a Branson construction, shirt stretched tight across muscles built more at the gym than on the job site. His gaze quickly scanned the room like a lion looking for the weakest prey. He was the kind of man who peaked in high school and spent the rest of his life trying to go back to that point. Life, attempting to get back that little feeling of power. His gaze fell on Sarah Assas. She walked up to their table with a notepad in hand, his lips curved into a sneer that his friends knew all too well, while the look on his face before he made his nasty joke about his 2 crew members behind him was a mask for his brutality. Followed like hyenas after a lion, already laughing at whatever their leader was about to say to them, prepared to give out because this was their morning entertainment, their way of feeling better than someone else before going to work as anonymous workers. Well, boys, it looks like we have a mystery here, Chad proclaimed loudly enough for half the diner to hear his voice, conveying that particular tone of phony joviality bullies got really good at when they wanted everyone to know something terrible was coming. Hey waitress, why don't you dress a little cooler? This place is hotter than hell, yet you're bundled up like it's winter in Alaska. What are you hiding beneath all that fabric? Something ugly. The crew laughed as they said, you don't want the health inspector to see the track marks from the meth lab explosion. The sound was sharp and piercing in the morning quiet, and other customers instantly found their coffee cups. The journalists were fascinated by that kind of weakness that let evil grow because good people chose comfort over confrontation. Sarah walked up to their table slowly, her face a masked professional neutrality that had been honed through years of comparable experiences. Even if Michael could see the tiny tightness in her shoulders, the morning sun came in through the diner's window and hit her left hand, which was carefully placed beneath the order pad. Dirty windows that generated long shadows that looked like they split the room into areas, the bright areas where life went on as usual, but in the darkest corners, previous traumas were waiting for times like this to come back. Sarah's face stayed neutral, a mask she had developed over the years of dealing with rude clients. But there was also something deeper, a calmness that came with encountering real horror and living through it. "Good morning, what can I do for you today, gentlemen?" Her voice had no emotion or reaction to the insult, which just made it appear to get Chad even more excited. Like a shark that smells blood in the sea but doesn't know it's swimming towards its own doom. The fact that she didn't react seemed to make him even angrier, as if her refusal to be baited was a personal affront to him. He got angry and his face darkened with the kind of wrath that little guys feel when they need others to feel from his corner. Michael watched the spectacle unfold with more and more stress, and his hands unconsciously turned into fists that were their own scars from a distant time and place, made his knuckles white as he tried to stop himself from doing something right. Intervention, something in the way the waitress acted and how she handled herself amid the verbal attack reminded him of someone who has been through a lot worse than the minor cruelties of small men and lived through it. The snapshot in his pocket seemed to get heavier as he looked at her profile, for proof in the way her jawline, shoulders, and the way she tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear her ear with her right hand while gently placing her left hand behind the order pad. All of these moves looked like they were trying to hide something while keeping up the appearance of normalcy. His mind raced with parallels, putting together his recollections of that night with the woman in front of him, attempting to make sense of the blood-covered harrow of his memories with this humble waitress who served coffee to individuals who didn't deserve to breathe the same eros her. Chad sat back in his seat and pretended to look her up and down with fake contempt. That would have been funny if it weren't so mean. Maybe you could start by telling them why you're dressed for winter in the midst of summer. Of summer disguising burn marks from a cooking accident when you were too dumb to monitor the fryer. Or maybe you're just off those cutters who can't deal with real life without hurting themselves. The words hung in the air like poison. His friends shifted about uncomfortably, and their laughter became forced and tense as they sensed he was going too far. And an older couple at the next table looked at each other with concern. His jaw tightened, as if he was about to say something, and his hand reached for the cane next to his chair. But his wife's soothing touch stopped him. A touch on his arm held him quiet while she whispered, "Don't make trouble, Harold. It's not our business." Even as her gaze, the shame of choosing safety over virtue was almost tangible in the diner, like unbearable heat before a storm, with every customer fully aware of the drama, but stuck in that strange state of paralysis of those who wanted to help but were afraid of becoming targets themselves. Even the cook had stopped making noise in the kitchen and was looking through the service window with his palm tightened on the spatula as he frowned, as if he were thinking about whether or not to step in. One of those times when people displayed their true colors when they had to choose between comfort and bravery, but most of them were failing the test, just like they had so many times before. The air felt like it thickened with unsaid shame and rising tension, making it feel like something had to give under the pressure, would either go away or blow up, and it seemed like everyone was holding their breath to see which way would come. But why was this stranger in the corner staring at her so hard? What did Michael Kelly know about this waitress who seemed normal that made him hold on to his coffee cup so tightly that his knuckles turned white? He tried hard not to grab for the picture in his pocket over and over again, as if it were a charm against the answer, which I doubt will come soon, will upset the very foundations of what everyone thinks about the calm woman Hobotham. Coffee with scarred hands and downcast eyes. The cruelty in Chad's words became more with each passing moment, eating up the diner's stillness like a parasite, getting stronger from its host's vulnerability. "You know what do you think happened?" he said out loud, talking to the guests, who were uncomfortable more than Sarah herself. "That's what happens in these small towns. A meth lab explosion leaves scars on people. Heating drugs until boom." He made an explosive gesture with his hands that made Sarah step back without meaning. It was such a small movement that only someone as closely monitoring as Michael would have seen it. Or maybe it was a home. "She works at this dump because she got drunk and passed out with a cigarette, which started a fire. No one else would hire her. Someone who looks like Freddy Krueger's sister made one of his team." Members laughed nervously. The other person, on the other hand, had started to seem very uncomfortable, with his eyes flitting between Chad and the other customers, who stood still in their seats while Sarah's internal fight played out in small facial gestures that most people would overlook. The way her breathing changed from steady to carefully controlled, and the little tremble made her eyelids tighten. She tried to hide it by squeezing the order pad tightly for a minute, but the diner faded away, and she was back there, with the taste of sand and blood in her tongue, the weight of gear on her shoulders, and the moans of the injured soldiers cutting through the night air. But she learnt a long time ago how to shut those memories down and lock them away, in a box, with the words "do not open" on it, and a life that no one understood or cared about. She had seen and done during the breakfast rush at Mel's diner took a different type of bravery than fighting to smile and serve coffee to strangers who saw her scars and formed conclusions, murmured behind their hands, and gazed. Chad dug into his wallet with a dramatic flair and pulled out two when he thought she wasn't looking. "There you go, love, your tip. Pick it up, maybe. Save up for some scarf cream. But I don't think they manufacture anything strong enough for the horror show you're hiding, like dead leaves." The money fell to the dirty linoleum, and it felt like everyone in the cafe held their breath as Saretha, old guy at table 3, had half stood up and peered down at them. His face was red with anger, but his wife's anxious murmur of "Harold, please don't make trouble," delayed him from fully standing. The cook in the kitchen had stepped out from behind the service window, his huge form blocking the door, but he too hesitated, trapped between his Sarah bent down because her protective instincts and the fact that staff rarely had good outcomes when they confronted customers. Slowly to get the bills, she moved carefully and with purpose, and each motion was planned and measured. It was as if she stood up and said that Chad committed his deadly mistake at that time, which would transform things in ways none of them could have imagined, whether it was on purpose or just because he didn't care. His hand shot out as she stood up and pushed her shoulder hard. The sudden movement was strong enough to have her stumble sideways, and it messed up her neatly kept look as her uniform shirt came untucked from her waist, and her sleeve rolled up over her elbow. It wasn't just the scars that it was something else totally that made Michael feel bad at that moment of planned cruelty. Kelly's blood ran cold and then heated very quickly. The tattoo stood out, military sharp and unmistakably real. 3rd Infantry Division, Ramadi, 2006. Against her scarred skin, the wounds themselves expressed their story by wrapping around a picture of crossed rifles and the division's unique symbol. Own story, a horrible story etched in broken flesh that told of intense heat and brutality, tissue that had been scorched and healed in ways that made it look like a sacrifice, not an accident. The whole diner could see it now, this insight into a buried history that changed how they saw things in an instant. One of the younger clients was a college student who was home for summer break. I whispered, "Holy, that's a military tattoo," loud enough for everyone to hear. The mood changed noticeably, like the air pressure lowering before a storm. As some people started to understand while others, Chad stayed confused. But he didn't notice the change in mood because he was too inebriated on his own. Saw how Michael had gotten up from his booth, or how other customers were now looking at Sarah. "Oh, this is rich," with something like wonder instead of pity or hatred. Smiled and pointed to the tattoo that was showing. "Look at this, boys, she's playing soldier. Did you buy that phony tattoo online to elicit sympathy by pretending to be a veteran?" His laughing was loud and harsh, like smashing glass against the walls of the diner. "I've seen this before. These people who steal valor and buy military items at surplus stores and act like they served are pitiful. No one would believe that someone like you actually served our country. You probably can't even spell Afghanistan." Zara stood still, her clothing still messy, and the tattoo on her arm and scars were now completely evident under the bright fluorescent lights. Her face had gone pale beneath her meticulous lipped, her cool, and for the first time since the fight started, real emotion showed on her face. Not angry or mad at what Chad said, but something deeper and more complicated. It was the face of someone whose most private pain had been forced out, and her carefully built walls had been broken down by casual cruelty. Her hand unconsciously pulled down her sleeve, but stopped halfway through, as if she knew it was pointless to try to hide. What had already been witnessed was that the diner was completely quiet. Despite the coffee machine's normal gurgling, Kelly had crossed half the distance to their table, as if he was stopping to think about how serious the situation was, before he even knew it. His chair fell to the floor behind him as he hurried to get there. His eyes were fixated on his tattoo, with an intensity that was almost like a religious epiphany. His thoughts raced through memories and, coupled with the speed of automatic weapons firing, every detail he could see corroborated what his emotions had. The way she moved, the precise control, and the specific design of that unit had been telling him for the past 2 hours. He couldn't fake the insignia because he'd worn the same one, and his hand shook when he reached into his jacket pocket. His fingertips brushed against the picture he had carried for 18 years as a charm to help him remember. At that instant, time stopped for him. The past and present collided with the force of an IED blast, and all of a sudden it smelt like cordite and burning fuel, combined with the everyday smells of coffee and bacon grease. But what made this silent second? Sema abruptly jumped to his feet. What did a construction worker's harsh games have to do with a veteran's horrified recognition? If you've ever been in the military, you know what's about to happen to Michael's. The way he walked was like a guy strolling through a dream, with each step precise and planned as if the floor could give way. He could have fallen at any moment, but his gaze stayed on the tattoo on the familiar emblem that had marked his own skin once upon a time, before shrapnel and operations took it away, along with so much else. The coffee cup, the sound of his palm hitting the table was loud in the unnatural silence that had settled. He stated his voice was barely above a whisper, but it was obvious in the silence above Mel's diner. The infantry. His voice broke as he said, years of searching and wondering. In this 1 minute of infantry. Recognition. No, it can't be. After all this time, it just can't be. He stopped 3 feet from Sarah, close enough to see Thiwe. Her eyes got big with something between fear and recognition, far enough to give her room to go, if she opted to look at Michael's face closely and methodically. The type of inspection Theta salted from years of making quick decisions on who to trust and who to be afraid of. He looked from the tattoo to her face, looking for things that were recognizable, and that time and trauma had changed but not completely gone. Could you be? The question that hung between them like a bridge spanning 18 years of separation. In the summer of 2006, Romani meticulously picked each phrase to be a password. To Sarah's reaction was instantaneous and intense, since it was something that only 2 persons in that diner could truly grasp. Her body tensed up as if she were getting ready for an impact, and her eyes darted to the exits like a caged animal looking for a way out. Escape routes. But there was something else there too, a glimmer of recognition that she couldn't quite suppress, even though years of practice hiding her feelings. Oh my God, Michael whispered, and suddenly his voice was heavy with the names of Sergeant Miller and Sarah Miller fell from the sky with a loud click, making it clear that the puzzle pieces were in place. His lips moved like a plea that had been answered after years of doubt, and his hands moved without him knowing it to his chest, fingers tracing the outline of scars that were buried under his shirt. The scars were the same kind as hers, but not in the same way. You're the one who pulled me out of that flaming Humvee. The statement wasn't a question. It was a pronouncement of a truth so deep that it appeared to change the air in the diner. Been sitting here for 2 hours because I thought I saw ghosts. I've been lugging your picture about for 18 years, looking for you in every VA hospital. Veterans are getting together on every online forum, and here you are, Sarah, making coffee in a cafe in the middle of nowhere. Her carefully kept demeanor eventually broke, and the tray she was holding fell to the floor with a sound like gunfire. In the quiet room, cups broke, cutlery fell, and coffee spilt on the linoleum. In a dark pool that no one moved to clean, she lurched back, grasping for the counter to stabilize herself as her legs gave out. No, she muttered, shaking her head in disbelief of what her eyes were telling her. Eurythi informed me you didn't make it because the injuries were too bad and you died in Germany. Voice broke on the final syllable, years of shame and sadness pouring through the holes in her professional veneer. I believed I had let you down all these years. I thought I had failed to save you. Tears streamed down her face without stopping. One, a reminder of the nights spent going over those times and wondering if she could have done more, moved quicker, or been better. The news spread through the cafe like a shockwave, affecting everyone in a different way, but having a big impact on everyone. Chad's laughter stopped in his throat, and his sneer faded as even his limited mind began to understand that there was something important going on that made his small acts of cruelty seem unimportant. Deserved. His crew exchanged apprehensive glances, their former swagger disappearing. In the face of Rial, the old couple at table 3 held hands tightly as they played small-minded games that were dwarfed by their emotions and history. The mother had tears in her eyes as she mumbled something about their son, who had gone to college. The student had put his phone down, the need to film seemingly lost in the face of something too deep for Evan. The cook had come out of the kitchen completely, blocking the door with his body as he watched the scenario unfold on social media. unfold with the attention of someone witnessing history alive, Michael said, his voice stronger now, filled with the kind of feeling that comes from being so thankful that you can't put it into words. Because of you, you ran in to pull me out of hell itself. When everyone else was rushing away from the fire, you raced towards it. He made a step, he moved closer, being careful not to scare anyone. Knowing that he was getting close to someone who had been living, they told me that a female soldier saved my life. But in the turmoil that followed, I had invisible wounds for almost 20 years. I lost count of time when they sent me to Germany. Then Walter read 4 months of surgery and they reported you had been discharged and disappeared into recovery. By the time I could ask questions, he took the picture out of his pocket and held it with great care. This was all I had. An image from before that night and the recollection of someone not wanting to leave me behind. Sarah's eyes were locked on the take a picture of her breathing hard as she saw faces from a different life. Young warriors smiling at the camera, with the optimism of someone who hasn't yet learnt how much war really costs. A finger touched the air over one face, especially a young man whose face looked a lot like the one in front of her, which made her feel more sure of what she had already knew. Rodriguez didn't make it, she murmured quietly, naming another face. Thompson didn't either in the picture. I tried so hard to get everyone out, but the second I ate, her voice cracked. The weight of survivor's guilt was clear when she couldn't finish the statement that had tormented her dreams for 18 years. In every part of her body, the weight of being the one who lived when others didn't, the curse of memory that never. The ambience in the cafe had changed. Even as she filled coffee cups and cleared tables, the air felt thick with the weight of shared history and unsaid sacrifice from consumers. People who came in looking for little more than breakfast and coffee ended up witnessing something much deeper, a reunion that spoke tough bonds that are made in battle, the obligations that can never be paid off, and the mending that can happen. Just the early sun coming through the windows seemed to shine a light on the two of you, making your sacrifice seem more important. Veterans throwing lengthy shadows that looked like bridges between the past and the present. At that moment, Mel's Diner was no longer just a wayside restaurant. It was now a location where hidden valor was, where the scars, both visible and hidden, showed the actual cost of freedom. How could a regular waitress save a soldier's life in Iraq? The answer was starting to become clear to everyone there. But before you jump ahead, trust me, Chad is about to receive what's coming to him. Chad Morrison's face went from smug to confused to something like desperation as he realized what was happening. Changed from being smugly superior to being confused, and then to something like desperation as he felt Thetchinge in the room's dynamics like a predator suddenly realizing it has walked into the domain of something far more hazardous than himself. He couldn't believe that he was no longer the morning's entertainment. Director had been taken over by something real and deep. He became even more harsh, like a man who had never learnt when to back down since they were taught that doing so was a sign of weakness and that kindness was for. Now his voice became whiny, making him sound even more miserable than before, like a kid on a playground. Bullies suddenly faced adults who weren't impressed by his posturing. "Oh come on," he said, waving his arms around. He looked at the image in front of him as if he could wave away the feeling like smoke. "Don't fall for this act. She probably simply peeled." He pointed to Sarah with a quivering finger and said, "Look at her. If she served in the military, she would have cooked potatoes." Movements, becoming more irritated as he sensed his audience slipping away from his grip. "She's no hero, just a scarred up no one is trying to get sympathy by telling a phony story about Iraq, burning cars, and whatever else she's selling." The words came out faster now, as if volume and pace might somehow give him back control over the position he had. So badly that every syllable he wrote made the hole he was digging for himself even deeper without him even realizing it. "I've seen this trick before. People buy military surplus stuff at Goodwill and act like heroes to get free meals and discounts. It's called stolen valor, and it's disgusting. It's an insult to real veterans who have served. They term it stolen valor when you get meals and discounts. It's terrible and disrespectful to true veterans who have served. Serviced, not like this waitress, who presumably got those scars from a grease fire or a bad circumstance at home." He looked to his staff for help, but they were backing away, their faces revealing that they were starting to understand that their commander had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed and said things that couldn't be unsaid. Even they, even the brightest bulbs in the box, could see that something big had changed in the diner's ambience, not in a safe place where their regular behavior would be accepted or ignored. Chad's statements had an effect. Quick, but not what he had planned. like tossing petrol on a fire he thought was dying, only to see it grow. Explode into a fire that would kill him. Where before there had been awkward stillness in the face of his now, and there was a real sense of anger growing among the diners. The kind of hatred that came from the old man at table 3 was completely on his feet now. Seeing someone challenge what they had just learnt was precious. His wife was no longer holding him back, and his aged face was set in lines of distaste that showed he had seen actual. He replied, "You ignorant little shit," his voice shaking, and he knew it was the antithesis of valor. "I served in Vietnam when I was older and angrier, and I recognize a real soldier when I see one. Sit down and shut up before you make things worse for yourself." Chad was beyond reason and couldn't read the room or see what was going on. The danger he was in was trapped in his own story of being better than everyone else, which was falling apart around him like a sandcastle before a tsunami. Michael Kelly's reaction would be the most terrible, with his face going through feelings that ranged from disbelief to wrath to something colder and more controlled expressions of a soldier who had learnt to channel fury into useful action, who had been instructed to utilize words. Ash turned away from Sarah slowly and carefully, making sure that each action was planned. Capture attention and keep it, changing himself from a desperate searcher to an avenging angel in the interval between heartbeats. "Peel it, potatoes." The words blasted through the diner like a command on a battlefield, causing a lot of people flinched without meaning to, and coffee cups rattled on tables because of the sheer power of his vacuum. "You stand there in your comfortable existence, with your whole body and your wrong ideas, and question her service. You want to know who she is. The woman you've been making fun of and tormenting for having scars. Things describe a story your small intellect couldn't even begin to understand." Michael stopped and allowed the questions. The sound of oncoming artillery hung in the air. He looked around at the throng to make sure he had their attention, full attention, before he started tearing down Chad Morrison, which would be talked about in this town for years to come. Come July 15th, 2006. Ramani, Iraq, 120 inches the shade. But there was no shade in that hellhole, just sun, sand, and death lurking around every corner. The voice got lower, making everyone lean in to hear a storyteller's technique that made everyone pay attention. As we drove back from our patrol, the tension grew like a spring getting tighter. We considered the kind of we had done this assignment 100 times before. 3 Humvees, 12 soldiers, and everyone was fatigued. When thinking about getting back to base for what passed for dinner in that place when the world blew up, he stopped again. His eyes were far away now. He wasn't looking at the diner but at a dusty road half a world away, experiencing moments that had been burned into his memory. With the kind of clarity that only trauma can give. The ID impacted the lead vehicle, which was my vehicle, with enough force to flip it over. Rodriguez was driving a 9,000-pound armored Humvee that flipped over like a doll. Michael's voice caught on the word humanizing the statistics of war. A fine boy from El Paso, 22 years old, had was preparing to propose to his sweetheart back home when we came back. The blast killed him right away. At least that's what we told ourselves, because the thought of him being in those flames was too horrible to think about. Thompson was unconscious and bleeding from a head wound that appeared like it could be treated if we could get him care quickly enough. His hand slid back to his chest without him realizing it, and his fingers traced scars through his shirt. I was stuck. The blast had bent the doorframe like a pretzel, making it impossible to open, and the fire was already spreading from the broken fuel. Eating its way through the inside of the car like a living monster that wants to eat human flesh. "Have you ever," Michael asked Chad if he had ever seen a car fire from the inside. But he was really talking to everyone. That's so real that a lot of people moved without thinking about it, as if they were feeling heat. "Have you ever felt your skin start to blister while you were still awake and aware of what was going on? To be burned alive and yet be able to smell your own flesh frying? Have you ever known for sure that you are going to die badly and there's nothing you can do about it, except scream and wish for it to be quick?" The questions, they weren't rhetorical. They were weapons targeted at Chad's conscience, which they thought would break his. Sergeant Sarah Miller showed up then, when he was comfortable with the stark reality of what he had derided. Our unit's medic was supposed to stay back with the injured people from the other vehicles, but she could never follow that order when her Michael's voice had become rhythmic, like a prayer or a battle hymn. Each syllable sounded like it was coming from a different place, meticulously chosen to bring the plot towards its eventual climax, constructing a tale that changed Sarah from she ran into the flames, becoming from an unknown waitress to a legendary hero in front of their eyes. She didn't think about her own safety or anything else. All she worried about was that one of her soldiers needed help. She used her bare hands and a battle knife to burst through the window. Her medical supplies were inadequate against the imminent threat of fire, just resolve that I've never seen matched. Before or after in all my years of duty, he looked squarely at Chad's glare cut through the man's bluster like a laser through paper. He pulled me out first, dragging 200 pounds of weight. A soldier in gear through a window that looked too small for them. The flames were burning at her clothes and skin. She was already searing from the heat, but she didn't stop. She went back. For Thompson, even though anyone with good vision could see the fire had extended too far, even though the heat was making the bullets cook off and sending rounds flying like lethal fireworks going off in every direction. That's when the second eye went off. Michael's voice kept getting lower until it was barely above a whisper, which made the diner even quieter. As everyone tried to hear, the command subsequently revealed it was set up to catch first responders. Sarah saw it coming. The terrorists had perfected the method to kill as many medics and rescue workers as possible. The moment of recognition that comes with experience and training. And instead of rushing for cover like everybody else, she threw her body over mine, which made him stop swallowing hard, as a sane person would, resist the feeling that was about to take over him. Even after 18 years, the blast should have killed us both. Would have right away if she hadn't built herself a human shield by taking the shrapnel and debris and heating them up. She had already inhaled gases into her own body to protect mine. By the time the quick reaction force got there, she was unconscious and her back and arms full of burns and metal that looked like something out of a horror movie. But this horror was real and it was picked, and it was more heroic than anything Hollywood could think of. The cafe was so quiet that it felt like it was alive, save for the subtle sound of someone crying. Maybe the old woman, maybe Sarah herself, or maybe a lot of other people were moved by the story of sacrifice laid bare before them. Michael WASN single quotes T. Finished. Even though he had been looking for 18 years and wanted to thank Chad Morrison for giving him the perfections to do it in a way that would make it clear who deserved respect and who didn't. 17 Hera marked the number hanging in the air like a verdict. That's the number you need to know. 17 troops are thing no. Seeing their families live their lives because Sarah Miller put other people's lives ahead of her own safety time and time again. She didn't leave anyone behind. So 17 families didn't get folded flags and well-worded letters of condolence, even when rules dictated to have medical staff on hand for future casualties. Michael's voice became stronger and stronger, reaching a crescendo that would earn him a Bronze Star for bravery. Shatter whatever was left of Chad's self-justification. Purple Heart for wounds incurred in combat, conflict, medical badge with a star on it that shows you took part in ground combat. Miriata service medal. What did she want in return? Nothing. What kind of recognition did she want? None. She went back to civilian life with those scars on the inside and outside, working in this cafe, serving coffee to individuals who called her a monster, made fun of how she looked, and tossed money on he was moving now, pacing like a caged creditor, and his rage was growing with every step, every syllable, until it was like a real person in the diner. You, Chad Morrison of Branson Construction. You dare to name her Freddy Krueger or question her service, and you throw $2 on the floor and tell her to get scar cream for the wounds she got, while rescuing lives that you aren't worthy of polishing. The boots of the digital age had come to Mel's cafe with a bang, while Michael talked about how smartphones were like whip-hands drawn to protect honor, their cameras recording every word of his evidence, and Chad's face getting paler and paler. This is going viral, someone said from the back, their voice full of shock as he realized how big his mistake was. 89,000 people are watching my stream right now, and it's spreading with the thrill of seeing justice happen in real time, across platforms like wildfire. Another voice, closer to Chad and impossible to ignore, said, "That's Branson. I just tagged their full leadership team, their corporate account, and their interconnected universe on his shirt." The diner's walls were see-through, which turned a local event into something that people all around the world could see. Chad Morrison will remember this moment for the rest of his life. His phone started vibrating insistently. The screen lit up with message after notification in a stream of digital dread. His face was already pale. From Michael's face went pale when he saw the caller ID reveal his boss's name, then his supervisor's name, and the numbers he didn't know, which were either reporters or furious people who had obtained his details online. The phone kept ringing, and text message alerts and social media notifications joined in, creating a symphony of things that were about to happen that got louder with each passing second. My boss, He muttered the words so softly that they were scarcely audible over the "oh dear, my boss is calling," but the mob between him and the exit WASN, single quotes too, interested in his sudden need to deal with the consequences of his conduct their features, showing that everyone agreed that he would have to face the music here in front of everyone, including her, who was calling Chad's as comments poured in on the live broadcasts that were going out all over the place. It became evident that the response was phone over and over again. His employer, co-workers, and reporters from all over the internet spread like wildfire. Local news stations, veterans groups, and soon everyone who was important to him will know exactly what type of man he was. Hype karma, if you think. Chad deserves what's coming next because the universe was about tone-graved into his life with the permanency of Sarah's scars. A lesson, in respect that he would never forget. Bob Hutchinson, the manager of Mel's Cafe, stormed through the kitchen doors with the force of a man who has heard enough to recognize that his business has become the center of something much bigger than a simple customer dispute. Bob was a Vietnam veteran, but he didn't talk about it much. The only thing that showed it was the faded Marine Corps tattoo on his forearm. His face showed anger and shame as he looked at Sarah standing there, with her scars evident to everyone, tears still running down her face, and Michael shaking with righteous wrath. With Chad anxiously attempted to turn off his phone that kept ringing while the crowd blocked his way out. What the hell is going on at my diner? Bob's voice had the weight of someone who had delivered commands while under fire. One of the live streaming clients pushed their phone into his face, turning his question into a demand for quick replies. Towards him, showing him a clip of the fight that had already been seen hundreds of millions of times. Bob's face grew darker with each passing second, and his jaw clenched as he watched his employee being humiliated and attacked. Chad Morrison, he whispered, his voice lowering to a menacing whisper, "Get out of my store right now, and if I see you within 100 yards of here again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing and assault." But customers who were in Chad's way had made a human wall with their expressions showing rage as a group. "My phone," Chad hesitated as he looked at the screen where his boss's name flashed quickly. "I need to answer." The crowd wasn't. Samin asked him to put it on speaker so we can all hear what Branson said. "Construction thinks." Chad's hands were shaking as he answered the phone and fumbled with the speaker button. Morrison said, "What have you done? We've got thousands of messages coming in every second. Our website is down, and press vans are on their way here right now. The owner phoned me personally. Do you know you're dismissed right away. Security will pack up your things. Don't come to the property. Please put us down as a reference, and Morrison, you better hope this doesn't go to court." The queue went dead, leaving Chad. His cheeks lost all color as he stood there with the phone still clamped to his ear. Sarah finally found her voice after everything that had happened to her. It felt like a building was falling down on her. The fight had changed from being mean to being honest. "I didn't want this," she remarked. "I was meticulous and calculated. All I wanted to do was serve coffee in peace and live a calm life. Life where my past didn't shape every interaction she had with Michael and Harry. Thought of you every day, every nightmare, and every time I glanced in the mirror. I looked in the mirror and thought about how I couldn't help Rodriguez and how Thompson died despite everything I tried." Her voice broke on him. "Sorry I couldn't save them all. I'm sorry I wasn't faster or stronger, better." Michael traversed the space between them in 2 steps, wrapping his arms around Sarah in a hug that said they were in the same boat. "Trauma and complicated. Thanks, you saved who you could," he continued, his voice full with emotion. "That's all that matters. I've been looking for 18 years to say thank you and tell you that my daughters are alive because of you." They held on to each other. The diner exploded in spontaneous applause, with the sound going from scattered claps to a loud roar. Chad's crew members, who had been left behind by their boss, joined in the applause, maybe finally getting it. Bob Hutchinson waited for the ovation to quiet down before speaking again. "Sarah," the weight of what they had seen was heavy. He stopped for a moment and said, "I'm sorry. You've worked here for 3 years and I never knew or asked. That's my fault." Effective immediately, you're promoted to shift manager with a 30% rise, and you don't have to do anything else. Stop hiding those scars. Anyone who has an issue with them has a problem with me. He turned to talk to the whole diner. "This place honors those who serve and has always will." The crowd move aside so that Chad may stumble towards the exit with his phone still vibrating with calls and texts. As he got to the door, he looked back, maybe to say something in his defense, but the angry looks from the other customers stopped him no matter what he said. He ran out into the morning sun, leaving behind only the sound of the bell. 6 months. Later, Sarah Miller stood behind the counter of Mel's diner, which had changed in small but important ways. The manager's outfit had short sleeves that showed off her scarred arms. She no longer felt the need to hide the wall. There was a framed picture of Sergeant Sarah Miller in full combat gear behind the register, coupled with a sign that said our hero was now joined by pictures of other local warriors. The morning rush was in full flow as the bell rang and a familiar face walked in. Chad Morrison stood in the doorway, but he was no longer the cocky person he used to be. I know I'm being watched by regular customers who recognize me. So I slowly walked up to them. Not welcome. Chad's voice was low, but I had to do this in person. He put an envelope on the counter. I lost everything after that day. My job, my wife, and my home. I had to move back in with my parents. But the saddest thing was realizing what kind of person I had become. He pointed to Thigh. I've been helping at the Veterans Center for 4 months now, and we have raised $5,000 via our efforts. Not enough, but maybe it's a start. Sarah saw how different he looked from 6 months earlier. When the pricey gym was erected, his muscles had softened into the slimmer body of someone who did real work, and his fancy attire had been replaced by his hands, which used to be delicate and well manicured, now had volunteer insignia from the Veterans Center on them, calluses from painting walls and fixing wheelchairs. The kind of honest where that came from working rather than self-indulgence made a lot of frequent customers stiffen up when he stepped in and thought about that awful morning. Harold from table 3 had already gotten halfway up from his seat and was ready to defend Sarah again if he needed to, but something in Chad's behavior, including how he kept his eyes down and his shoulders stooped as if he were carrying something heavy, caused them stop and observe instead of act. As Sarah glanced at him, she didn't see the arrogant, not the bully who had hurt her, but a wounded guy attempting to put himself back together, and she knew that kind of brokenness since she'd lived with it for 18 years. The envelope in his hand shook a little, and she could see writing on the back, including signatures and notes from other volunteers at the center veterans, who had apparently concluded that even someone like Chad should get a chance to make things right if he was ready to put in the effort. Stated quietly, they made me earn the right to do this. Harsh with feeling 6 months of coming up every day without excuses or complaints, they remarked that if I could achieve it, maybe I was serious about changing. Sarah looked at him for a long time before taking up the sheet. Didn't open the envelope. Instead, she put it in the drawer and looked him in the eye. Everyone deserves a second chance, she said. Remarked softly. Service taught me that sometimes you save people who wouldn't save you. Makes us human. It wasn't quite forgiveness, but it was something. Chad nodded, knowing this was more grace. As he was about to go, Sarah cried out, "Chad." He stopped and looked back at the Veterans Center. Needs volunteers to keep coming. The smallest grin reached her lips. That's all any of us can do. He nodded again, and as he walked into a future that might bring forgiveness if he was willing to. The bell rang softly behind him. Sarah should forgive Chad for what he did when he came to the Veterans Center every week. Please let me know in the comments what you think about second chances and if people can really get them.